Hi all, I'm Vijay Jethani. So this is Az400 exam preparation session. As this is the first session, so we are going to cover exam construct first and then we are going to get started with our session 1. Okay, so let's get started. So from exam per se, this is an design expert for Azure DevOps. Okay, so in this exam, basically you are going to cover end to end of DevOps. And as this is design and implement, so basically you have to know the terminologies around DevOps. Similarly, what are the tools being used for DevOps? Similarly, how you take care of security. So that is end to end at high level from an exam per se. In from an exam question per se or from an exam construct per se, you will have three type of sections. First section will deal with the solution, whether the solution meet requirements. You have to answer yes or no for that. And other section will be for case study, which will judge you on basic from that particular scenario, what will be your approach or how you will, which particular tool you will select. So that is a case study. And third type of section will be multiple choice, so you have to select one or two answers from the available options. Now overall it will be 50 plus questions. And remember, even though this is a design and implement and expert exam, you will not get any labs here. But still I would recommend, while we complete this session 1 or any particular session for this exam preparation, you try out all the hands-on lab so that you are equally proficient to work on DevOps on your own. Okay, so from an exam construct, these are the three sections and they will be provided to you in any order in exam. Now let us look at the modules. So you have design and implement module, which is basically the what kind of the project management tools you are using and how, what is your branching strategy, what is your team strategy, and all those things. This will cover your first session, which we are going to cover today. In second session, we will go a more in depth of what this branching strategy look like, how do you review your coding practices, similarly how you will raise an issue, you fix them, how you get them promoted to the production. So those all right from a selection of your a branching strategy or repository strategy till working on your code reviews, that is what we'll cover in section 2. So in session 3 we will actually get running towards the build and release cycle. So that is where you will see most of the automation happening in our session 3. In session 4 we will cover more in depth of security, how you cover the security right from the development to your release or the deployment stage. So that is what you are going to cover in the fourth. And fifth is more of an implementation strategy, which is nothing but a monitoring, what you do to get feedback or what you will do from a day-to-day operations is what that will cover. Okay, so let's move on to what the agenda look like from an exam per se. Now for today's session, which is on the design and implement, process and communication, the weightage is 11%, and these are the topics which you are going to cover in this particular session from an exam per se. Now at high level this looks too much and there are too much topics scattered around, not in a specific sequence, but we will try to make it more simple while we move further in this particular session. But I will just brief you about the implement traceability and flow of work look like. This is more of how you structure your branches, how you actually get your issues resolved. Similarly, how you provide or manage those particular work items, issues, bugs. That is what this particular A topic look like. Okay, similarly for metrics and queries for DevOps, this is more on what you will do to keep it day-to-day operations and dashboards created for a respective builds getting succeeded, builds getting failed, and all those things. Okay, and third is more of a what kind of history and what is your review strategy, approval process, how you will actually release it in a continuous way, and how you show them in a respective dashboards, and making or having appropriate collaboration in place. Okay, so this is what the exam says, but to put a structure to this is what the agenda for today will be. First, we will look at what the DevOps is all about. So everyone knows about DevOps, and so that is the reason I will not start with the definition. We will start with DevOps lifecycle and get started from there. Similarly, is an agile team. What are the different products you have for Azure DevOps and GitHub? What are the different project management tools you have? What kind of the strategy you put in place? Similarly, while working in the repositories, how you take care of issues and pull requests. And technical depth is more on the code quality. How you make sure that you are taking care of the failures and taking in consideration that your builds are getting succeeded from there after once you know the failures, and you are working towards how you are working towards fixing those issues so that they don't come back, is what the technical depth talks about. Okay, and finally I will also show you, even though not part of the exam, I will show you how the hands-on labs is meant for. Okay, and what kind of the labs you should perform for the session 1 and the coming session, so that even though that is not covered part of exam, but from a day-to-day working and you being proficient in DevOps, you will need these expertise. Hence, hands-on labs will make you confident enough to clear this exam with the terminology which you are going through. Okay, and further readings more on if you want to try out any other topics which you see in a practical enterprise environment or organization. Okay, so that is what we will cover. So let's get started. Now let's look at the DevOps lifecycle at first place. If you see in simple terms, I'm having a plan, then build, which is giving handover to the deploy, and which operates and gives me a continuous feedback. This is in a simplest sense the DevOps lifecycle. That means plan is nothing but I have to make sure that I have appropriate resources in place, I have appropriate technology in place. That means I have selected what kind of the code I will going to build before I build them. Similarly, if I have a team and resources, obviously I have to put a structure to this, how I will work on. That means from where this will come from a business goal. So business goal will be to build something or to release new feature or to build the new product. So that is the business goal. From there onwards, I will start with my planning and putting appropriate resources and technology in place so that I can get appropriate plan build and then hand over to the release for getting it finished towards the production end. Okay, so in simplest sense, this is what the DevOps life cycle is all about. I will pause here for a while so that you look through this particular diagram. Okay, so moving on, while you do this build, these are all the workflows. Okay, so you will not get the DevOps build and test succeeded at the first step itself. Obviously not. You have to go through the iterations. You have to fix few things which you may not have thought of or you may not have put in your workflows. So that is where DevOps is an iterative process. So at times you are having bad or you are going through an improvement, or at final you will get good. So this is an iteration cycle. So over the deployment frequency, the more you deploy, the more expert or proficient you become in automating the DevOps as a process. And while we go on to stage, what you are gaining is you are gaining a learning which you have tested on ground. Okay, so what we make out from here is a value of an improvement. That means while I did this, what I achieved is so far is I know how to fix those bugs. I know what kind of workflows is working or not working. Similarly, I should be now able to automate DevOps as a process end to end. Okay, so whatever DevOps lifecycle you have seen through, it consists of the stages, and we have to follow them step by step so that we get a desired results at the end. Okay, moving ahead, what how do I measure my project outcomes? So while I have been given a broad level business goal that I have to build this product or I have to build this feature, how do I measure myself whether I'm really succeeded or not? So that is the outcome. Whatever time I have spent by fixing the bugs or working on any unplanned work, if I really have to work out of hours. Similarly, whether I have done any direct testing without any project management. Why this gives me a clear outcome of my success versus failure is because if I'm putting unnecessary efforts on something which is already being available, or if I have not taken appropriate project management steps, that this step should be followed first and then second then third, then obviously I'm going to go fail for that particular build and development. So my project outcome should be measured in terms of time, in terms of resource capacity I'm using. Similarly, whether the efficiency or quality of product is up to the standards is what I will look at. Okay, so that is the reason these things have to be taken during the project management stage, that yes, this is what I want to measure this while I do the build and release stuff for my project. Okay, so I will just pause here for a while before I move further. Okay, so now going ahead, before I even put my project in place, I want to make sure what kind of approach I will follow. Now here there are a lot of arguments I have seen that people say no, it's only the agile, I will not follow the waterfall approach. But what about if you are the team, if you are very small team, or if the project itself is very small, the volume of the project itself very small, it's hardly one bug fix or one feature which is hardly a day or two of job, then in that case you will not have the agile approach, nor you will have some constrained teams which are working on sprints. At times you will not require, for that small project you will not require sprint as well, can be right. So waterfall versus agile is an approach based on your volume and size of the development and build. You have to decide upon which approach you will follow. Like see enterprise organization which is having a different modules for a full-fledged website to be developed, then in that case obviously I need a very structured, there will be n number of work items versus the task being carried out by the different teams, and who is on leave versus who is on job at that point of time. I have to take care of n number of things. In that case agile works best. But what about if I'm very small organization, I only have a handful of developers and one or two testers. In that case I'm only can work based on the availability and the constraints and as I have on my team. Okay, so waterfall versus agile approach, you will purely decide upon the volume of the project, the resource constraint you will have, and obviously the what product you are trying to build. whether that really requires that a complex team for a success or quality deliverables. Okay, so again I will pause here for a while before we move further. Okay, now we have decided about whatever project approach will be, right, based on waterfall versus agile. Now important things which agile gives us out of box. The agile gives us the measurable, how I should measure whether I will be succeeding or not. First of all, for me to succeed, I should welcome any changing requirements. Why? Because if project is built in the modules, it may or may not be dependent on the current module. If it is dependent, obviously I have to wait for that and there is no overrun on that. But if it is a parallel feature which I have to release, there is no harm starting that in parallel. So that is where first of all I should welcome any changing requirements and make sure whatever being worked upon, the team is divided, or I would say a project management is done in such a way that irrespective of whether anyone is on leave, the work should continue as per plan. Then there should be proper documentation of what works versus what is not working. During team calls, the bugs and the problems need to be called out clearly, what timelines they will take, what is the complexity of that, those needs to be discussed. That is what is the mean of agile principle, so that you know what kind of the excellence you require, what kind of bug you have, or what kind of problem you at hand. And obviously there has to be a sprint which takes care of in how many days or how many weeks I'm going to complete this particular piece of work. So that gives me a clarity at high level that yes, I'm going according to my plan and I'm doing the quality deliverables after all the tests are being performed. So agile, if you see in these all whatever being written, they are talking about the same thing through the projects and measuring what is right, wrong versus excellence you have, how you are documenting them, you are organizing and reflecting it to be more effective based upon the sprints. Okay, so these are the agile principles. So again I will ask you to go through for a while I pause here. Okay, so now let us look at the different agile teams. Now in first case I have a horizontal teams. That means I have layer wise, that is presentation layer and the SOA layer and the data layer. So I have three layers and accordingly I have splitted the different teams or expertise what they have. So UI will look into UI of email, voice and TV. Similarly SOA will look at the middle layer and data will look at the bottom layer. But in problem with this approach is no one in any team, UI, SOA and data are fully aware of end-to-end project problems, end-to-end collaboration or even the project functioning, what kind of the sprints, what kind of the delivery plan they have. They are only aware of their own schedule, that is UI, SOA or data. So in practical scenario where you are in enterprise, you will need a team who is dedicated to that project. Otherwise you won't be able to deliver on time. Okay. So that is where the vertical span, that is a person who is dedicated to the email delivery. Someone is delete voice project. Someone is on the TV project. They are different UI team members who are dedicated to that, so that they are aware and available in all team calls. They are aware of bugs being raised. They are aware of the timelines for whole project. Similarly is end to end quality is what matters. It doesn't matter if UI is able to deliver 100% versus SO is not able to deliver only 75%. Doesn't make sense, because once the product is released, it is going to be measured overall. Customer does not know UI versus SOA versus data. So that is the reason vertical team structure always wins in an enterprise scenario, where horizontal team will fail based on the efficiency, okay, or the knowledge about that project. So make sure you are aware and are accordingly aligning appropriate team members, or I would say dedicate the appropriate team members so they are available for full life cycle of that sprint or project. Okay. So till now we have talked about a DevOps life cycle. What are the different stages? What is expected out of us, or I would say what is our mindset once we adopt DevOps? You can't get it running on the first day. You have to go through iterations. You have to learn through what is causing the failures. You have to fix them, make sure you measure them, and then appropriately deliver on time. Okay. And while we do so, our project approach also matters. Whether we have taken a waterfall versus agile depends upon the volume or the size of that particular ticket or work we have. Similarly, depends upon the constraint we have on the resources. Okay. So based on that, you follow the waterfall versus agile approach. Agile gives us some of the measurables, how we should look at from the coding per se, how we want to document. Similarly, welcome the changing requirements so that no time is wasted on depending on the other team members who may or may not be required for that particular work. Okay. Also make sure the project management steps and the project is followed in appropriate sequence so that agile delivery of those projects is taken care. Okay. Then last we have covered agile teams, that is whether we have to select horizontal versus vertical teams. We should be able to decide based upon the which is better for our project. So vertical team is always better because they are dedicated to a respective project. They follow appropriate sprints and are available throughout the life cycle of that project. So that makes them fully aware of the challenges they face on ground by any team, because at the end of the day, the goal is to deliver to a client, a customer, and not to measure the efficiency of UI versus SOA versus a data team. Okay. Now, this is more of the process and approach which we follow. Now let us look at what products we have as a part of this exam. As a part of exam, we have two products. One is Azure DevOps, another is GitHub. So let us look at the different product or tools we have within this Azure DevOps. The different tools which we have is Azure Boards, which is nothing but the project management tool. It takes care of your sprints, your resources, your development work, on the storage of your code, that means repositories at a, I'm just saying at high level, so that you are aware of the terms and terminology and able to map this product. Okay. So Azure Board is a product for project management and day-to-day dashboard and reporting stuff. Azure Pipeline. Now you may be working on the code, or I would say a workflow which is going to build and test your code. So for that, Azure Pipeline is being used, and for even deployment, the Azure Pipeline is used. Azure Repositories is where you have the all change control, change history of your code, so that while you promote your code from development to production, there is appropriate approvals in place, code review is being done. So Azure Repositories help with that. Azure Artifacts is where your package management is taken care, where different types of repositories, we have a different dependencies, so we are able to pull those dependencies as well as make available the finished product while we are done with build and testing. So we need some kind of repository before we can give it to the release team for deploying on their environments. Okay, so Azure test plans are nothing but an integrated plan. Now test plans are more of a approach, right? So this approach will tell me that at this particular stage I want to do these 4 tests. Similarly, it will give me what are the outcomes I'm expecting, or whether I should make this a fail versus depending upon what outcomes I've got. So test plan gives us an overall approach of whether I should call this as a success versus failure. Okay. Now these products, remember, from a terminology per se, you will be tested on, and appropriate solution requirements will test you on whether this meets your requirement or not, or whether this is the right product being used for that particular implementation or the design which they present to you. So from an example, say, remember the terms and terminologies and the product mapping. Okay, again I will pause there for a while before we move further. Okay, so similarly we have the GitHub products. So now both the GitHub and Azure DevOps are the parallel DevOps product, but I think they both complement each other as well. Now we may have GitHub repositories on GitHub, and we may have the pipelines or even the reporting stuff on Azure DevOps. Purely our choice. We can select hybrid approach as well. But from an exam per se, we should be aware of the product lifecycle or products they have. Okay, so now from GitHub products, let's see code spaces. Now you may have seen the ID, which is Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio. If you have to see that online version of that, code spaces is the online version of that. Repositories, similar to what you have Azure repositories, it will exactly the same thing of keeping your code, maintaining the history of that, and making sure that code reviews are taken care, comments are captured, issues are being raised, and the code is promoted to production after testing and fixing the bugs. Okay, actions is similar to what we have for Azure pipelines. This is a workflow which is help us to build and test, build the package out of it, and pass on to release after testing. Okay, so action will do that. Packages are again the repositories where you package management tool, where you not only pull out the dependency from an open source, but also make sure your package final version of your build packages are available for a consumption from the release team from here. Okay, now the way you have seen test plans in Azure DevOps, similarly you see the security which is not available in the Azure DevOps. So remember, these security doesn't, here we are clearly calling out a security as a product. Azure DevOps does not call security as product, doesn't mean that Azure DevOps is not capable of providing the security. It purely depends upon the product mindset which we had at that point of time. Okay, so Azure security is being taken care, or maybe from the development security, or even the integration related and flow which we have been talking now. So security, right from the credentials you are using, similarly the tokens you being used are called out here clearly. Okay, so remember, it may be the product in one side, test plan is not the product in GitHub, doesn't mean the GitHub cannot do the test plans. They both can do vice versa of all the work they are being good for. But from the terminology per se, or from an exam per se, just remember these product names. Okay, so that is the only thing which I'm trying to bring out here. Okay, now let us see how these products are mapped to the phases. Now we have seen the DevOps lifecycle. So in this DevOps cycle, we see the plan, develop, collaborate, deliver, and operate. Now, based on that, whatever I've been talking through, Azure boards, projects, so those are all part of your planning. Then you are developing something, you have a code spaces and Visual Studio Code. You are working on repositories or source control, you have Azure repos, GitHub repos. So this is a clear mapping of whatever the terminology which we have been using for these products. Okay. Similarly, for your pipelines or I would say a release stuff, you have Azure pipelines, test plans, artifacts, even the build pipelines as well, part of your deliver. Finally, operate is more on the monitoring of what is going on at the platform level. That say suppose any machine is the product is not get the machine is not for the product is not getting deployed or the package is not getting deployed. So there you have to really see out whether there's a problem with the deployment or there is a problem with the platform itself. So the monitoring product gives us those information which are listed here. From reporting per se, if there is a bug or issue, I would get from a project management dashboard, Azure DevOps dashboard. But if it is a problem with any particular platform related tool, which that I can get from an Azure or whichever platform I have implementing to that. So make sure you understand why these specific products are in these specific phases. Okay. So again, I will pause here for a while before we move further. Okay. So now let's get started with our project management stuff. Now, before we get started with the project management tool, which is Azure Boards in case of Azure DevOps, let us try to understand some terminology around that. Epic is a business initiative, a high level goal which we want to achieve, because even during development someone will give you the target, right? So I have to build this particular website, I want to build this new feature set. That is what the goal you will receive from business. So we call it as an epic, and everything here, whether it is an epic feature, user story, task, a bug, they all will be represented as a work item. Remember that. Now epic is at very high level. If I break down epic, I get a feature. So features are smaller, a more manageable piece of functionality within epic. So understand, I can't say I can't build build a full website. Obviously I have to break down that website into the front end versus back end versus something on the database related stuff, right? So obviously I have to do a functionality dividing and accordingly give it to a team who is capable of delivering them. Okay. Or I would say breaking down the modules so that a parallel work or agile work can be carried out. Okay. So that is what the feature is. Similarly, user story is nothing but a specific user need or functionality. Like simple example I can give you is, my need is this user needs a good dashboard. Okay. This particular functionality needs a good dashboard. This is just one particular functionality. For this particular functionality I need to do 1 2 3 4 4 tasks. So that is where I would put those user story into, map it to the 4 tasks. And finally, if something is not working and needs to be fixed, that needs to be bug. Remember, all of them are the work items, and I will show you practically. Let me move on to the dashboard. Now this is the Azure board dashboard. Okay. Now whatever I have told you from the terminology, here it is epic, this feature, user story, task, and bugs. So everything you see here in form of dashboard, it is very clearly manageable. I'm able to see what's working, what's not working. Similarly, what are the active versus close. So I can really make out really I am doing good work or my team is doing good work or not. So these kind of dashboards are very useful from a project management stuff, because in DevOps I have n number of running parts. Tracking each and everything, running after each and every team member is not required if everything is documented in a project management tool. Now let's look at what exactly they look like. So as I said, everything is a work item. I will click on these work items in this board and then make out what it is. At high level, I need a login and registration functionality. But for that to happen, I should have something from the functionality per se. So here you see feature, right? So login and registration functionality is a feature set of what I need to achieve. So parent, you look, and accordingly I should have a user story, because obviously if I need something, I need to do some work, and accordingly my login and new usage first on what portal with what, this is what I'm going to achieve. So if you again click on this, this is showing you the parent of it. So ideally what I'm trying to show you is from the epic coming to the feature set now to the user story. I have a link of what is going on with my product build features, which I'm going to show you. Similarly, I can also come here and see or link any particular stuff, whether it is the code related, whether it is going through review, or even I'm using a different tool from the Git as well. So this gives me a end to end of what what I am dependent on, and how I want to get it done. Okay, if I get this a dot connection across, I should be able to make my project management easy. Similarly, I should be able to deliver things on time. Now, this was one way of looking at. If you see backlogs, if something is a backlog, it should give me whether it is new resolved versus what exactly this meant for, and which iteration means which team is working on. So I will come out to the sprints based on who is working for those particular backlogs, what is the capacity of my team. So here I can just say my capacity is 100, so or 8 hours, 4 hours, here it is per day, so I would put capacity per day 8 hours. So based on that, I would say team is taking off for if additional off, by default this will only have a working Monday to Friday. So I think we are very much sure on our calculations of what are we going to deliver, or what we are how much time it will take for a particular module to get complete. And delivery plans can be also made based upon if it is an application team or the development team working on that, and accordingly you make the plan for that. Okay, so make sure we understand each and every stuff and have a timelines map to it, so that we are at end of the day able to track each and everything without running after team, and make sure we are seeing the active versus resolved and the close. And so that's all from an Azure board per se. We have now got end to end information about what's working, what's not working, our team capacity, what are the iterations we are following. Okay, so that's all you have to remember from the exam per se. Now this was one product from Azure DevOps, which is called Azure Boards. Now let us look at from the GitHub per se. Now in GitHub, if you come down to a project, so this is what I am again click on. If you click on the new project, so this is in your particular repository, come to the projects, and if you click on the projects and try to create, I will come back to the projects, I will start the new project, so that way you will. So here it is what. Okay, so these are the different templates. Ideally, whatever I've been talking through, the bug, no, not bug, from the epic, then feature, then you have the user story, then you have task, then you have the actual bug to be. So whether you want to manage team, whether you want to have feature release, whether you want to get dashboard, whether I want to bug tracker. So these are the different templates which you can choose for. And once you choose that, say suppose I want to look at the feature release, once you choose the respective templates, it is just a matter of adding that item. Say suppose I want to create a new item saying I want to track the authentication issues for third party. So say suppose this is what I want to create an issue for. So once I have this issue in place, this will be available in my project. So my status board will show that, and based on where I'm starting or whom I'm assigning, I can actually move this to a backlog until someone is getting assigned. And once that is assigned and in progress, this will move to the. So that is how you are going to keep track of. But remember, our main terminology, whatever we talked in Azure board, that is not getting changed. Only thing, the look and feel based on the different products, the GitHub projects takes a different approach, very different to the Azure boards. But based on your confidence, I think you can select Azure board versus GitHub projects. If you want to have a recommendation, the till today people are more confident on Azure board than GitHub project. But I think it's purely your choice or your team's choice what you want to get through. Similarly, you can have the timelines in place, you can have the bugs listed accordingly, whether anything is in review, you can link all of them at one place. So this is also a project management stuff which you are taking care of. Okay, so at this point of time, that's all we have from this session for the GitHub projects. Now coming back to the look and feel, this is what we have gone through. Okay, and while you raise these particular issues, or they will be available to you as a work item, everything is a work item, and whether they are ready in progress is again you can track of. Okay, now important thing to note here is, uh, while we have seen our DevOps lifecycle till now, we have understood terms and then talk about the two project management products. Now, what about the source control, or where we keep our code? So this is what it is. Source code is kept in a repository which has the branches. So development is a branch, testing is a branch, release is a branch, production is a branch. Now, based upon what you are doing, say suppose I'm doing the code build, so I would follow this particular cycle. The code is being built. Based upon, if I want to release new feature, I would create a new short-lived branch. Why short-lived? Because once my feature is built, I want to make it to the production. Similar is for feature 2. If once it is ready, I want to make it available. So we call it as a short-lived branch. And remember, whatever we do on development of feature 1, feature 2, all needs to be tested. That is where you have the testing branch. All of the code from these branches has to be carried out to the feature, from feature to the testing branch. Okay. So from the development lifecycle, this is what you have to follow. Now, how release is different? Because in development, you are actually working on code dependencies, reviews and testing, and getting done and dusted once it is promoted to the production. But in release, it is more of a platform. That means it will go through hot fixes, right? It will go through the service packs released by the vendor, or I would say the platform owner. So that is the reason both two are different. Okay, so you consume, like, first thing is for CI, which is your build and test. Another thing is your CD, that is your deployment stage. Based on that, once you are ready to consume the CD through packages, you are going to release or make those available. Once I have my platform ready with hotfix and service fix, I am going to actually deploy this. Okay, so remember this particular branching flows, and this is also called Git branching strategy, or Git development and release strategy. This is what the enterprises adopt for their day-to-day DevOps repository or branching strategy. Again, I will pause here for a while before we move further. Okay, Now what you're seeing here, like how we will do that, we have a separate lab for that. So I think the way you are going to merge and have the code review, but for the process per se, I think this is what gives you a good idea. First, you create a branch and add a commit based on what you want. Say, suppose I have created a feature one branch. Okay, so I create a feature one branch, I add a commits, or I do some kind of coding which is required for feature one branch to be built. Then once I'm ready, I will raise a pull request because I want my code to be reviewed and tested before it is promoted for a deployment or made to be available to the deploy. Here deployment doesn't mean the release deployment. It can be only to the development deployment and before I can merge to this development branch. Okay, so make sure you understand the terminologies very well. They may mix the terminologies, but I think we have to make sure that in what context they are talking. So again, I will pause here for a while so that you understand the flow of how are we going to do the code reviews and merging them to a production branch. Okay. Now, whatever we talked here, this was end to end of Git flow. But if I just want to have just for a development, so this was Git branching strategy. Okay, this is what we talk. Now this is Git flow. Now here we only have one branch. That means I have the main production, the development branch, and one feature branch. So you see this as a one development branch and one feature branch. This is more common in for a developers. That means I don't want to take care of release at this stage. I want to make sure I deal with only a small team, or I want to release. I don't want to be dependent on so many approvals. I just want to make sure that I have a necessary or limited team who does this work. So Git flow actually takes care of it in a very light flow manner and gets the approval in place so that this can be done very quickly. But for all enterprise, this may not be possible. Hence, this approach of a Git strategy or Git, this is what is the enterprise approach. Make sure you understand the terminology and how they are using. So Git flow is just the lightweight branch based flow, not just for developers. But this is, as I said, if you want to just deal with one branch or maybe two branches, one is a long lay branch, one is short lay, that is the main. So I developer is what the example I've given, but if you want to use for release, you can use for release, but make sure again, this is not the full-fledged enterprise workflow. This is only done in certain cases where you need to speed up. In practical scenarios, you will not do this quite often. If I have to compare this, this is what my comparison is for Git flow versus GitHub flow. The first thing which I've shown you with the release strategy and everything in place, this is Git. And this thing which I've shown you here, Git flow, this is your Git flow. So comparison, I'm just putting this table in front of you, just have a look through it. Many branches, which I've already shown you in Git flow, and versus one branch in the feature branch. Small to medium teams, here structured large teams, and for enterprises obviously. So everything is structured, so obviously it will take more time, complexity is more, approvals will take more time, merging will take more time. Everything is a structured way, so obviously it has going to Git flow is, but it is, I would say this is error free, but Git flow can take chances of not accommodating more, or I would say very limited visibility of other things or other coding related things which maybe other team might be doing. Okay, so make sure you understand the differences and understand the context of both these workflows. Okay, so Git flow versus GitHub flow. Now we started with the project management. We covered Azure boards and the GitHub projects. Then we started with the source control branching strategy, where we started with the Git. We talk about the development, feature one, feature two, merging back to the development. Similarly, we talk about release, which is from purely from the platform deployments. We take the build package as an input to this, and then we deploy it. And while deploying, we make sure the platform is up to the mark with the hotfixes and the service packs before we can deploy to them. That's all about release strategy on build and release, which we have seen. And this is the comparison. So now moving ahead, how do we measure our code quality, or what are the appropriate terminology which we should be aware of as a best practices? So first thing is, if anyone measures my code quality, first of all, my code should be readable. It should have appropriate comments in place. If I'm having any of a documentation, it should clearly call out what is the purpose of writing this code. And if there are different branches or different stages, it should clearly call out why I'm using those stages and what is the output of that. Once I'm clearly through that, then obviously I can measure my efficiency in terms of whether a parallel run versus a series run will make this faster. Okay, like say suppose if I have the two different technologies or the frameworks being used, one is Java, other is .NET. Obviously I don't want to wait on each other for any modules to be tested. They can go parallelly. But if one module, if the first module requires or has a dependency of the package to be generated and other module is waiting for that, then I can't directly jump. I have to make a strategy accordingly and have an efficient runtime. Okay, so that is my efficiency. Now efficiency also does not mean the runtime, or it also does not mean the number of lines of code I'm writing. It purely depends upon whether this is the best thing which I have done for the code build and release. Okay, similarly, whatever you are writing about the code, it should be maintainable. That means I should be able to reuse it in some way or the other. And extensibility is for that I should be able to embed them in some shape or form. And secure is obviously the end to end. I cannot release any product without being secure, so I have to take care of security right from scratch. So we have a session fourth which is purely on security, so we will take in depth about security in that particular session. Okay, now now I know the code quality, but what about my overall DevOps, whether I failed or passed? So that is what the measuring the technical depth is all about. If I'm able to make out my failed percentage, my deployment fails, what are the different volumes, that means what are the issues being raised. Similarly, if the bug was raised and I fixed it, whether it came back again, or that is what the bug bounce percentage, it should be zero ideally. If I fix something, it should not come back. That is what the bug percentage is, what I'm looking at. Unplanned, that means how constrained are my resources, whether my resources are really constrained in terms of they are being overutilized, then obviously I'm going to miss my deadline. Whatever project management dashboard I have shown you from the team per se, the planning per se, all has to work hand in hand. Otherwise this is going to get fail and we are not going to deliver on time. Okay, so technical depth is all about the failed and improvement over, so that we are able to deliver on time, and there is no resource constraint, there is no unplanned work, everything is clean and clear and acceptable by the client as it is. Okay, so make sure you understand this terminology as well. Again, I will pause here for a while before we move further. Okay, So now with that we come to the last topic, which is Git hooks. Now why Git hooks is required? So during deployment, we may need something like we want to apply patch, or we want to do some post cleanup after deployment. So there can be n number of things which you see here. So we want to make sure that our environment is clean, or we want to make sure environment is ready before the code is being deployed. Similarly, there can be some of the leftover of the upgrades. You want to clean up that. So for those all reason, Git hooks are being used. These are nothing but to ensure that platform is consistent, same and clean before we deploy our code on that. Okay, so this is the cleanest. And why client side and server side? Say suppose I'm trying to have hit on a particular website, but I want to make sure that this particular agent is available on this particular client. So I want to make sure, check the status of that agent is running before it can hit the website. Otherwise, this particular person who doesn't have the agent installed on his machine will always get the failed request irrespective of server is running or not. Okay, so that is where I want to make sure the client side functionality is running versus the server side functionality is running, and both the platforms are available and in working at their full strength before I can actually say success versus failure. So Git hooks are very useful in terms of, for especially for feature updates, cleaning up the website, cleaning up your server environments or the platform. Similarly, making sure that a particular patch or a particular agent is available on your machine before the deployment happens. So there are n number of things which you can think about a Git hooks, which you can directly deploy. Okay, now as I said, from a session per se, this is the last topic which you have to go through. But if you do hands-on lab, that will make your life easy in terms of understanding this terminology, whatever we talked about. Okay, at first place, you have to create yourself the project which you have seen in case of, see, I have in the, this is the project which I have created with the help of this particular lab. Okay, so make sure you have these prerequisites done, and this is a step-by-step guide, so you should be able to follow it as it is. There is no harm taking some more time here, but make sure you understand each and every, and it's done very in a proper way. So no step, I have done it myself, so you should be able to follow as well. Okay, so this is the first thing. First you have to create an environment. Then from this particular today's session, I want you to actually try out these two labs. One is actually creating this project management stuff, sprints, all on your own, and you arrive at the dashboard which we have seen. Okay, so in interest of time, I could not do that because otherwise whole session will go in this only, and you won't be able to get out what I'm trying to understand. But now as you have step-by-step instruction, this makes sense, so that both viewer as well as mind time is used effectively, and you have this particular dashboards ready with you. Okay, so by next session, I think you should have this dashboards ready with you. Similarly, on the other thing which is on the version control and having the commits in place or history in place for what your code is being committing, I think you should be able to work with this a second lab which is version con. So basically this Az400 hands-on labs is gives you all of these projects, hands-on labs which you can do on your own. Okay, so make sure you try this out, even though in exam they will not ask you to do any labs, but if you want to try something on your own in your own enterprise, in your own organization, this will really help you out and make the most out of what you want to achieve. Okay, so this was the last topic which I want to give you brief about. So now let's look at just have a summary of what we did. So what we did was we covered the DevOps lifecycle at high level, so you understand each and every stage and what we are doing from the DevOps. We also seen is it is not that you get the DevOps starting from the day one or from the first step itself. It is an iterative process. You will have the failures, you have to fix them and get it running, because you are trying to set up an automated process to deploy or build something. So obviously it will take time. You have to have that mindset in place. Then selecting the teams as well, you want to make sure you are selecting the right team, right resources, and have the appropriate project strategy in place. Because if you are thinking about the waterfall approach versus an agile approach, you want to make sure the agile is used where it's really required. A waterfall is used where you have resource constraint and you don't have more than this. So waterfall can be used here. Also, even the size of the volume of your product. If it is not much, if you just wanted hardly 1 or 2 days job for that, you can't create the agile team. For that, waterfall approach is the best. So that just to summarize, I think we should be open and take a planned, or I would say the rational decision based on the volume, based on the resource constraint, what kind of the project team structure I want for this DevOps project. Okay. Similarly, for a DevOps and GitHub products, we have gone through what are they. A project management, Azure boards and the GitHub projects both have their plus and minuses. So which you go through what you can get out of most out of them, and implementing the strategy is more on the Git versus Git flow strategies. And whether you want to review your code and get the pull request, this also you can go through that. Again, mapping feature 1 and feature 2 back or promoting them to production will take care of this. Code quality is the main thing, because we should be aware first of all what code quality means, documentation means, and then how are we measuring our project's success versus failure, how we want to avoid overruns. So technical depth take care of everything. If we succeed on that, obviously we are done our good work in terms of not only planning, building a right team, developing with the right skill set, and finally closing down the final deliverables and getting the quality or I would say getting the quality deliverables to the client. Okay, so that's all for today's session. We will now meet in our next session of the source control. But till then, thanks for your time. Have a nice day.